Welcome everyone, as we learn with the help of Hashem, the holy learning instituted by the Arizal and completed by the Chidah, Chok Yisrael, for Parsha Shlach, Yom Shishi, Day 6, Be'ezras Hashem Yisbarach. And we learn tonight the 11th parak of Masechtas Oholos. If you remember, the last time we learned Oholos, it was extremely difficult. When David HaMelech asked Hashem that the saying of Tehillim should be considered like learning, he didn't ask for any learning. He asked for the hardest learning of Negaim, the very difficult study of biblical leprosy, and this Masechta of Oholos. So, of course, the learning of Oholos is itself. Tehillim should be like Oholos. Imagine the reward of learning Oholos itself. This parak is easier than the last one. Here we're talking about in Mishnah Aleph that there was a house that had a corpse under its roof. And along the entire width of the ceiling, in the middle of the ceiling, there was a fissure, a crack. So there was a hole straight through the ceiling on a line splitting, bisecting the roof into two pieces. And at the halfway point of the house, you could see the stars from that long split in the roof. There was a hole in the roof across the full width of the house, in the middle of the house. So a bayish nisdak, a house that's split, the ceiling is split in the middle, so the ceiling reached till the crack, and then it continued after the crack. So the crack divided the house. Tumah b'chutz, if the mace was in the outer part of the house, near the door. Kalim shebifnim, utensils that are under the roof on the far side, tahirin, are tar, because the tumah does not extend past the crack. The crack stops from the tumah from extending to the other side of the house. Tumah b'fnim, if there's tumah on the inside of the house, in other words, the corpse is on the inside of the house, so there, kalim shebechutz, utensils on the outside of the house. Now here we have a rule that normally we would say that soifat tumah lotzes, that the corpse is going to have to be taken out through the front door. So it's going to have to travel to the front. So Beishami Oimrim Ad Sheyehei Basedek Arba Tvachim. The only time that the tumah stays on the far side and doesn't extend to the closer side beyond the crack towards the door is only when the crack is 4 tfachim wide. Because if it's 4 tfachim wide, then we say that the tumah could go out by the crack and doesn't have to come to the front. Beis Hillel says not so. Koshu, even if the crack is the smallest of slivers, even less than a tefach, that crack separates it, and the tumah stays only on the far side and doesn't spread past the open crack to the open sky. Rabbi Yaisi, a third opinion, Rabbi Yaisi says, Mishum Beis Hillel, in the name Beis Hillel, that the crack has to be at least a piseach tefach. It has to be an opening of a tefach, not less, in order that the tumah should stay on the far side and not pass to the front side of the house. Now, in the next case, instead of it being a house that's surrounded with walls on all sides, it was an achsadra, a type of patio, which is covered with a roof, and the roof is supported with poles, but it's open on the sides. And here again, there's a mace on one side, and there's a crack in the roof of the patio going along the sides. But here, the mace could exit from the sides of the house. So therefore, because there's no walls on the side. So achsadra shenistika, if the roof of the patio is cracked, tuma b'tzad zeh, it makes no difference which side. If there's a mace on one side, kelim shebitzad hasheni, utensils on the other side, tahirim, atar, because it doesn't pass through, because the tumah doesn't have to go out from the front, it could go out from the sides. Now, let's say there was a crack, but nosen es ragloi oikana milmalon. If you put your foot to cover the crack, or a reed on top of the gap, and closing that gap for at least the length of a tefach, so now it's all connected, because you closed the gap, so you gave a connection from the back to the front, then Erev esatuma, then you allowed the tumah to co-mingle, and the tumah extends from the back of the house to the front of the house, or from the front of the house to the back of the house. However, nosan es akona ba'aretz, if you put the reed on the ground under the place of the crack, that doesn't help, because the reed doesn't go up, it doesn't elevate to go up and close the crack. Eina maybe as atoma achie gavoya min haaretz pesach tefach. Oh, if that reed is off the ground a tefach, so then it has a din of a roof, because it's off the ground a tefach. Then we say the halacha l'Moshe misinai of good asik mechitzasa, that we levitate that roof to go all the way up to close the opening, and then once it closes the opening, it makes the roof one, and then the tumah from the front goes to the back, or the tumah from the back goes to the front. Now Mishnah Gimel gives us a similar situation where you have a crack, but instead of there being a reed on the floor, there was a sagais ava, a thick woolen garment on the floor under the crack, or vikofes ava, or a thick beam. Now you'll say, well, the woolen sweater is a tefach high, so maybe since it's a tefach high, it should levitate up. No, because it has to be lifted off the ground from the bottom of the sweater, or from the bottom of the beam. Einon Mevi'in Asatuma, it cannot unite the two parts of the roof to become as one, unless the sweater, the bottom of the sweater, or the bottom of the beam is off the ground a tefach, then it's a roof, and then we would say the halacha l'Moshe misinai of good asik mechitzasa, of levitating it up to close the gap and make the roof as one. Kfulin zu al gabe zu, if one sweater is folded on top of another sweater, then eina mevina satuma achetei al yoina. If the upper sweater is off the ground a tefach, if it's gvayim and aretz pesach tefach, then we do say it serves as a roof, even though the lower sweater is in the way. But since it itself is elevated off the floor a tefach, so then we do levitate the second sweater up to the top to close the opening for at least the area of a tefach, thereby uniting the two roofs as one, and the tumah in the front would pass to the back, or the tumah in the back would pass to the front. Now, what about if on the ground is a man? This is very interesting. What about if on the what about if on the ground was lying a man under the crack? Haya Adam Nasan Sham. If there was a man lying under the crack. So Beis Shammai says, look, he's not off the ground at Tefa, so he doesn't serve as a roof. Eina maybe as a Tuma. Beis Hillel has a very interesting view of viewing the man. Beis Hillel says that we look at the body, the outer body of the man, his skin, his flesh, as a cover of the hollow inside him. And therefore we view the interior of the body as a hollow, so that we say that the skin is a roof over the hollow of his body, and therefore it is a Pesach Tefach. Adam Chalalu, the interior of a man is viewed as hollow, V'atzad ha'elyon, and therefore his upper part of his body is considered a roof, and therefore that we elevate to the top of the crack so that it seals it and is maybe as a tumah. He bases this because of the lashon of a pasuk in Eov, Or uvasar salbisheni, with hide and skin you clothed me, ubat atzamais v'gidin to seichecheni, and with bones and sinews you roofed me, so that the outer part of the body is like a cover for the hollow that's within, and therefore it's considered like a roof, and therefore can be elevated with the halacha l'moshe Sinai of good asik mechitzasa. I already made a bracha. Let's say that there was a third story window, and Marshall was leaning out the window and looking at a funeral that was going on below, and he has his stomach resting on the sill, and his chest and his head roofs over the coffin below. So the question is he an oil, is he a roof that brings the tumah into the interior of his house, because his feet are standing in the house? So Yamashkif ba'arach aloin v'hel al kovrei hameis, and he's roofing over as they bury a dead body. Beis Shammai l'shitasa, he holds that Marshall is not an oil, so therefore eina maybe as a tumah. He doesn't bring the tumah into the house. He himself becomes tumah, but he doesn't bring the tumah into the house. Beis Hillel says no, since his body is considered a roof over a hollow, so therefore he is considered a roof, and underneath the rest of his body brings the tumah into the house. So Beis Hillel maybe as a tumah. Now, even Beis Shammai agrees that the only time he doesn't is when the upper part of his body is naked. But if he was wearing clothing, then the clothing will be a roof. Or a person is leaning over Marshall, so that the upper person would be a roof, that Sheim Avian as a Tumah, then they would bring Tumah into the house. Here we have an interesting case. Marshall wants to get a suntan, but he only wants to get a suntan. He only wants to get a suntan. He only wants to get a suntan in his upper part of his body, his face, his stomach. He doesn't want his feet to get tanned. He's sensitive. So his upper part is outside of the house, and his feet is in the house. And there passes over him people who are carrying a mace on their shoulders, and they pass over his body that's sticking outside of the house. The question is, does he bring tumah into his house, since the rest of his body extends in the house? So, hayamutal al his skaifa, if he was lying over his threshold, and the outer part of his body is outside, and the inner part of his body, not the outer, the upper part of his body is outside, and the lower part of his body is in the house. Ve'eilu alav kavri amei. So again, Beis Shammai says that he's not considered an oil. His body is not considered hollow. Saying he doesn't bring the tumah into the house. Beis Hillel says that his body is considered a roof over the hollow of his rest of his body. So the tumah goes underneath him and is trapped in that oil and spreads into the house, and therefore maybe as a tumah he brings tumah into the house. Now, hatumah babayis. Here again, we have a reverse case. There's a corpse inside the house, and Marshall has his feet in the house. The upper part of his body is sticking outside of the house, and people pass over Marshall's upper body. They're mal over Marshall's upper body. Do they become tamei? So Beis Shammai mitarim. Beis Shammai says they're tar because his body doesn't have a din of an oil. It's not hollow. Or Beis Hillel mitarim. Beis Hillel says his body, his upper part of body, is a roof over the hollow inside, and therefore the tumah in the house passes under his body, which is an oil, and is now under his upper part of his body, and when they pass over it, they become tamei because he's an oil over a mace. Now, the next Mishnah discusses a new case. A dog eats a piece of corpse, enough to be metamei. A share of a kazayas, men a mace, a dog eats a kazayas. Now, while the dog is alive, the tumah doesn't pass out of a dog. A dog that's alive, the live dog is a barrier, and it doesn't project out. But the dog died. The dog died, so kelev she'achal b'sar hameis, a kelev that eats corpse, umeis hakelev, umutaloi alo iskaifa, and now it's the dog that's lying on the threshold, with part of it outside of the house and part of it in the inside of the house. Now, in this case, the dog's lower part of his body, his feet, and the lower part of his body is outside of the house. The head and the neck is inside the house. So Rameir Aimer, im yesh b'tzavorai priseach tefach, if the neck has the length of a tefach, so then the mace will pass out of there and enter into the house and be metam in the house. As the Mefarshim say, rounding off pi, if the circumference of the neck is 3 tefachim, so then the diameter is a tefach, using pi loosely, and therefore the tumah will spread. Maybe as a tumah, it brings tumah into the house. Vim lav, if not, ain't a maybe as a tumah. So that's the position of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yossi says, look, Rabbi Yossi, I'm a royan as a tumah. We have to know where the stomach is, because that's where the corpse is. Royan as a tumah. If mikineged amashkef lifnim, if the stomach is from the lintel and within, then abai is tamei, because the corpse meat is in the stomach. Mikineged amashkef lechutz, if it's from the lintel and outside the house, then abayis is tar. Rebbe Eliezer says, piv lifnim, habayis tar. If if the mouth you see, Rebbe Eliezer holds that we go according to where the rectum is, where the anus is, because it's going to come out of the anus. And we go derech hatuma lotzes. So therefore, Rebbe Eliezer I'm a pivlifnim if the mouth is on the inside and the anus is on the outside, so it's going to come out on the outside. Then Abaye star. Piv lechutz if the mouth is on the outside and the rectum is on the inside, so it's going to come out derech hatuma lotzes on the inside. Then Abaye is tamei. Shatuma yoytzeis derech shulav, because the tuma comes out from its bottom. Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira says since the animal sometimes regurgitates and chokes it up from the front, and even though this animal is dead, but it's normal for it to come out from the front. So Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira Omer benkach or benkach, whether the mouth is in the house or the anus is in the house, since sometimes it comes out from the mouth, it regurgitates from the mouth, the bias is tummy. Now, we're assuming that the corpse is still intact and wasn't digested. So, kama tisha b'meyav, how long does it have to be in the intestines that it should be digested and then not contaminate? Shloish yom me'eslei, 72 hours. So this has to be, if it's going to cause tumah, it has to be within 72 hours of when the animal died. So if it ate it more than 72 hours, so then it makes no difference if it died. But by birds and fish, they digest it really quickly. If it's in there the amount of time that it could fall on fire and burn, it's already digested and it's not going to be metame. Reb Shimon, Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira, by a bird and fish, it's 1 day. It's 1 day. Now the last two Mishnayos of the Perek discuss a different situation. Hechodus. Now this is a very unusual oholois term. Throughout the Shas, we don't call it a chodus, we call it just a dus. So the Rav says a chodus is just a dus with an extra ches. It's a peculiar etymological usage of the word cistern. A cistern is a pit dug in the ground and lined with rock. So a chodus shebabayis is a cistern built into the floor of a house, and there's a fancy candelabra inside the cistern, which would be mekabel tumah. It's made out of metal. Va'perech shela, on the top of the candelabra, there's a design of a flower. That's like the top of the candelabra has an ornate flower. Yaitse, it's sticking out of the cistern. Ukfisha nesuna alav, and the cistern has a cover, a basket, huge basket that they use to mash the olives. Now this basket is not mekabel tumah because it holds more than 40 sah, and anything that holds more than 40 sah is not mekabel tumah, and therefore it could serve as a partition from tumah to go into the cistern. However, the problem is that although this, and of course in this house, not of course, but I'm telling you the case, in the house is a corpse. And in the cistern are other utensils. Now the cistern is covered with this basket, but the menorah, because of its flower, is sticking up higher than the cistern and causing the basket not to completely seal the top of the cistern. But the basket is big enough that if you take away the menorah, it will sit on top of it and not fall inside the cistern. Shim tinotel ha-menorah, if you take away the candelabra, ukfisha imedes al pi hachodos, the basket is big enough that it will still sit and cover the cistern. Its bottom is bigger than the perimeter of the cistern, so it won't fall into the cistern. Beis Shammai says, hechodos tar, all the contents in the cistern is tar, even though it's not sealing it completely. But a menorah tmeya, but the menorah, since it's sticking out with its flour, it's tameh. Beis Hillel says no, since it's covering it and it's primarily in the cistern, af ha-menorah tahira, even the menorah is tar. But that's only because if you take the menorah away, it wouldn't fall in. But if the basket is not big enough, and if the menorah wasn't supporting it, it would fall straight into the cistern and not cover it. So Moedim, even Beis Hillel admits, Shim tinotel ha-menorah, if you would take away the menorah, ukfisha noifeles, and the kfisha would fall inside, so that the cover is supporting by a keli that's mekabel tameh, the cover is supported by the menorah, then akol tameh. The menorah is tameh, and everything in the cistern is tameh. Now, let's say there's a cover, and under the cover, kalim shebein sifsei kfisha lebein sifsei achodos. The cover, the basket, which is not mekabel tameh because it's so big, is sitting squarely on the bank of the cistern covering it, and there's needles on the walls of the cistern in between the cover and the walls of the cistern. Kaelin shebein sifsei kfisha lebein sifsei achodos afilu ad tahim, or if there's utensils in the wall of the cistern, or even under the wall, under the cistern, when the wall of the cistern ends, there's utensils underneath it, tahirim. They're all at a time, all the way down to the deep, they're tahar. Tumah sham, if there's tumah inside the cistern, then habayis tameh, the house is tameh, even if it's covered by this basket, because we say derech ha-tumah lotzeis, the tumah is going to have to come out of there, the corpse is going to have to come out of there and go through the house, and therefore, even though it's covered with this basket that's not mekabel tumah, everything in the house is tameh. Tumah babayis, if there's tumah in the house, and there are kalim shebekosle achodos. Here we're talking about a cistern that's not covered. Oh, here we're talking about a cistern that's not covered. And there's utensils in the wall of the cistern. So then it depends what the wall of the cistern, how it's made. Im yesh b'mekaymam tefach al rum tefach. If in the wall there's a cavity of a tefach square with a height of a tefach, so that means it has its own oil, so it's a different compartment. It's like it's under a different roof than the mace in the house. Then tahirim, then they're tar. But vim lav, if it's just embedded in the wall of the cistern, but it doesn't have its own roof, and remember the cistern is open, it's not covered, tameim. What if the wall of the cistern projects outside of the house? In other words, the cistern is built that half of it projects outside of the house. Im hayu koisle achadus, if the wall of the cistern rechavim mishel bayis is wider than the wall of the house, then benkach or benkach time, that which is embedded in the wall that's outside of the house, even if it doesn't have a area of a tefach by a tefach with a height of a tefach, since that's outside of the house and under its own roof and not under the roof of the house, either way, what's inside it is tar. And now we learn the Gemara in Masechtas Nida. The rest of the evening is significantly easier. And the Gemara talks about whether if a woman sees dry blood, does that make her a Nida? Rabbi Yaisi Reb Chanina, Rabbi Lazar. Rabbi Yaisi Reb Chanina inquires of Rabbi Lazar, Dam Yavei Shmau. What happens if a woman sees dry blood? And the question is, the lashon of the pasuk is, the language of the pasuk is ki yazav zav dharma, when blood flows from her amarachmana, and therefore I might think ademediv dayavle, only if it flows, and therefore lach in only if it's moist, yavesh loy, not if it's dry. Oiduma hai ki yazav zav dharma, that which it says the blood flows. Orcha de milsi, it only talks about the normal way. But really, even dry blood is also tameh. Amalei, so he says, Tenitua, we learned this in the Mishnah. Dama nida, the blood of a nida, ubesar hames, mitamim lachim v'yavation. They contaminate both moist and dry. So you see, if it's dry, it's mitameh. The Gemara says, no, not so fast. Amalei lach v'nasa yavesh, if it was once moist, and then it became dry, like kamabayli. That's not a question. I know that's tamei. Ki mebayla yavesh meikara. I want to know what happens if it comes out of the woman dry. So the Gemara says, Hanami tinitua. We learned this also. Hamapeles kamin klipa. If a woman miscarries, the form of a red shell, kamin sara, the form of a red hair, kamin offer, like red earth, kamin yafchushin adumim, like red flies. Tita l'mayim, you should put it in water. Imni maichu, if it becomes, if it dissolves, so then tumah. Then we know it's dam nida, and it's tamei. So by the way, we see over here that even though if it comes out dry, it's still tamei. So the Gemara says, so then why do we have to let it dissolve? It should be tamei the way it is. It's dry. Even if it doesn't dissolve. Amar Rabba says, no, we have to give it the test because it might not be blood at all. It might be something else. It might be the crust of a wound in the woman or the hair of a wart, an internal wart, and then it's not damnida. Amar Rabba ki loy nimuchu, if it doesn't dissolve, bury it b'fnei atzmi. It's a different entity. It's not damnida at all. Says the Gemara, is there such a thing? Says the Gemara in. But Tanya, we learned, Amar Rabbi Lazar Reb Tzaddik. Rabbi Lazar Reb Tzaddik reported, Shnei Maisim Hela Abba Metivin Liyavna. My father, Tzaddik, brought 2 stories when he went from Tivin to the academy in Yavna. The first one, Maisha B'isha Shoya Mapeles Kamin Klipais Adumais. There was a woman that was miscarrying red shells. Ubalu v'shalu es Abba, and she came and asked my father. V'Abba shalu chachamim, and my father asked the sages. V'chachamim shalu l'roifim, and the sages asked the doctors. V'amar lehem, and the doctor said, Isha zum imake yesh lo b'seich meyel. This woman could have a wound in her womb. Shemimena mapeles kamin klipais, and from it she's shedding crust. Tata l'mayim, put it in water. Imni muchai, if it dissolves, then it's blood, then tameya. But if not, it's just crust, and it's not damnida. V'shuv ma'isa b'isha ha'isa mapeles kamin sa'aras adumais. She was miscarrying red hairs. Ubav v'shala esaba. They came and asked my father. V'abba shala chacham. My father asked the chacham. V'chacham l'reifim. The chacham asked the doctors. V'amar lehem shuma yesh la b'seich meyah. She could have a wart in her intestines, in her womb. Shemimena mapeles kamin sa'aras adumas, and from it is red hairs. Tita l'mayim. Put it in water. Imni muchai. So then it's damnida and it's tameya. Now, Amrei Shlakish, this test to see if it dissolves should be done, ubepaishin, it should be done with lukewarm water. Now we're going to learn a zayar that is very enlightening. This zayar tells us the value of having a beautiful table set for Shabbos, and also the importance of the Borei Moreh Eish that we do in Havdalah. Tochazi, come and see, Biyuma Sisa, on the 6th day, Erev Shabbos, Kadmota Zimna de Erev, when it comes the time of Friday night, Dolig Ligavahu Nura Medura de Esha, a bolt of light, a bolt of fire, leaps out from Gehenna. V'solka la'ela la'ala goyv gavdin, and their attacks 3 klipos of tumah of different colors that also wants to attach itself to the holiness of Shabbos. Kidein mistakrin Yisrael l'sata. At that time, Klal Yisrael is preparing below, u'misadrin sudasin, arranging their Shabbos repast, u'maskerin psarin, and making a beautiful Shabbos table. Kol chad, the chad pesorei, every family making a nice table. Kidein chad, from this merit, shall havis nafik, a holy fire comes out, ubatish b'humadora, and kicks and pushes away this unwanted fire from Gehenna. Kavan the batish bay, and when this holy fire kicks it, mizgalgal in ahu shalhuva v'humadora, this flame, this bonfire rolls, v'olin benukva d'tayim araba, and goes into a hole in the very deep, v'istamron, and hides there, v'yas v'istamon, and stays there. V'ahu shalhova, the fire of Kedusha that is caused by our beautiful table and our prepared food, Iyo mesitra d'yamina, it comes from the side of right, from the side of holiness. Or begin to hu mesitra d'yamina, since it comes from the side of holiness. Aber lahu madura, it passes over that unwanted flame. V'olei lenukva d'tayim rabba, and pushes it into that hole in the very deep. Yosef Taman and the Nafka Shabbos, and it stays there until Shabbos leaves. Kaven Nafka Shabbos, so once Shabbos leaves, Itzrachul Amad Yisrael, it's about to burst out. Itzrachul Amad Yisrael levorcha al esha. They have to make a bracha Borei Moreh Eish on fire. Oh, when we make the bracha Borei Moreh Eish on the fire, l'kfayt Kedusha Shabbos, hahu shal hova, that fire, bebirchasa de lasata, from the bracha below, goes and shalit alhu madura kol ha'uleilia, it rules over that fire the whole night, this kaf yahu madura, and humbles that fire. So the Zohar is telling us 2 things. It's telling us how important it is to have a beautiful Shabbos table set. It protects us from an unwanted bolt of klipos from Gehenna and keeps it at bay the entire Shabbos, and the importance of the Borei Moreh Eish of Havdalah to again stop it from reappearing. Now we learn the Musar from Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid. You know, it's very important to make a good choice on who your friends are. That's why Chover is the same letters as Bochar, to choose. You have to choose wisely. It says that the worst thing is to have a Chover Ra or a Shochen Ra. So says Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid, Kishetishal al Odom asher tirtze l'schaber imoi, when you inquire about a person that you're thinking to make a friend, Sha'al mirei ehu, check who their friends are. Ki ha'adam oise k'maisei, because a person does like his friends. Right? That's what it says. If you want to know a person, find out who their friends are. Al kain kishetia b'seich am. Therefore, when you're in the midst of people, hisro'eya l'toiv, gravitate to good people. V'al tisro'a l'ra, don't gravitate to bad. Pen Torah kamo, because lest you become bad like them. We are affected by our environment. Our friends have a tremendous hashpah, influence on us. V'kach amru, im derech ish l'cha nistera, if a person ways to you are hidden, you can't make him out, is he a good person or not? Habeit ure'ei imi oisel chevra, look and investigate with who he's friends with. Ki kol oirev, the oir of the raven, the crow, is a tamidika bird. Ki kol oirev leminoi karev, the crow hangs out with other tummy birds, with tame yikra, and one tummy bird calls to another tummy. So if you see he's hanging around credit card thieves, then you know, stay away. Kishetidab, now we have some more sage advice from the great Rabbi Yehuda Chassid. Kishetadaber balayla, when you talk in the night, hashbel kolcha, lower your voice. People are sleeping. Gezel shina. Ukishetadaber bayayim, and when you talk in the day, habeit tzvi v'secha, look around, see who's listening. Your words are not for everyone. V'hizar b'dvarecha min ha'koisel she'acharecha, and be careful with your words from the wall behind you, because there could be somebody on the other side of the wall listening. Ki yomas adam b'kishloin l'shaynai, a person could die from the stumbling of his tongue. Hamavis v'chayim b'yad halashon. Death and life is in the hands of the tongue. You can get yourself in fatal trouble with what you say. V'al yomas b'kishloin raglav, you're not going to die even if you stumble. If you stumble, Rahman al-Islan, a person lo yaleinu might break a leg. It just means he'll get somewhere slower, but he won't get into a life-threatening situation. Ki b'kishloin l'shayna yoser es roishay, because saying the wrong thing could cause his head to be removed. You see, this is the time of Rabbi Yehuda Chassid, where they lived amongst goyim and amongst people that did Masira, that slandered people to the king, and they got their head cut off. The kishloin raglav, but with the stumbling of one's feet, yerafa loritz ma'at. He's going to only, he's going to need to be yerafa, he's eventually going to be healed, and he'll have to run slower until he does. Now here he says, don't be quick to say yes. First, assess the situation if you're going to be able to do what you're asked. Kishetisyorei min acharata, if you're afraid that you might regret what you committed yourself to, emer lav koidem hein, say no before you say yes. Because once you say yes, it says motzat sefasecha tishmar v'asisa. You have to keep the words of your mouth. Ki lav achar hein, because to say no after you already said yes, magunamai, that's very, very ugly. So to back out on your word is a very unseemly thing to do. The kasher toimer hein kafel, on the other hand, when you gave a double commitment, you said, yes, I'll do it, then kayim ashamarta. Then work to uphold your word. And that's a Jew keeps his word. And that's the integrity of a Jewish person. And now we'll learn the Rambam in Hilchos Shabbos. He's talking about interesting types of the malacha, toldos of the malacha of bishul. Hamatich echad memine matchas kolshu, if one softens a type of metal, even a little bit, or he warms up metal until he makes it into a coal, a glowing coal, Harizet told us mavashel. That's a derivative of the malacha of cooking. V'chein amamase says hadoinag. If somebody melts wax, or yes a chalev, or fat, or yes a zephes, or tar, v'akaifer, or pitch, v'agafis, or sulfur, v'kiyatzebem, or any similar materials. Harizet told us mavashel. It's a derivative of cooking. V'chayev. V'chein amavashel kli adam is somebody who cooks on earthenware vessel in the kiln. Ad shiyaso cheres, until it's an earthenware keli. Chayev mishum mavashel. He's chayev for cooking. Klol shel davar. The principle is bein sherifa guf kasha, whether you soften something hard, like softening metal, beige, in fire, or hiksha guf raf, or you harden something soft, like baking an earthenware vessel to completion. Harizeh chayev mishum mavashel. You're chayev for cooking. Hagoyze semer, one who shears wool, cuts off wool. Oiseyer, or hair. Bein min ha-behema, whether from an animal, bein min ha-chaya, beast, bein min ha-chay, whether it's alive, bein min ha-meis, or it's dead. Afilu min ha-shalach shalem, even cutting it from the hide, chayev for the malach of shearing. Kama shiro, how much do you have to shear off to be chayev? Kedei litfois mimenu, enough to spin from it, chut she'orkoi kiroichev hasit kafel, whose length is like a double sit. Now, what's a sit? The kama rochav hasit. What's a sit? Kidei limtoyach min boyin shel yad ad ha'etzba, from the thumb, the span from the thumb to the finger nearest it, ad ha'etzba rishayna, kishi yiftach beineim b'kol koicha. They spreads it all the way apart. That's a sit. And it's double that amount. V'u karev, and it's equal, close, l'shnei shlishay zeres, to 2/3 of a zeres, to 2/3 of a span. Now a zeres is 3 tvachim. So 2/3 of 3 tvachim is 2 tvachim. So the sit is 2 tvachim, so a double sit is 4 tvachim. So it's enough, you're chayiv if you shear the amount of 4 tvachim. Hatoilish kanaf min ha'oif, if you pull a wing from a bird to use it for something, Harizet told us geizes. That's also a derivative of shearing. Hatoives hatzemer min hachai, if you spin wool off a live animal, potter. Why? Because that's not a malacha deraisa, because it's not the derech. She'ein derech geziza bekach, that's not the way of shearing. Ve'ein derech nifutz bekach, that's not the way of combing. Ve'ein derech tfiyah bekach, and that's not the way of spinning. So you're not chayiv for any of those 3 malachas, midaraisa, because it's not darka, and you're only chayiv if you do it the normal way. We want to thank you for joining us and wish you a wonderful night.